I apologize for the flight, young lady Claudia. The attendant spoke in a forceful yet courteous tone. The first class is paid for. Zara, the young black girl, is a passenger. She looked stunned and blinked for a moment. Back at her boarding pass, after looking down at as a first class traveler, Claudia, in a calm and gentle tone, she said, Here's, there must have been a mistake on my ticket. You're not welcome in doubt. I'll have to escalate this if you don't comply. Claudia stated firmly in call security. She had no idea that the girl she was seeing was the daughter was humiliated immediately after owner of the airline and would reveal her long-standing prejudice as we explore. Tell us where you're watching in this article from within the comments and select the subscribe button if you think everyone is ought to be treated equally without discrimination regardless of their identity. The airport was buzzing with the sounds of action. Travelers were moving quickly and bags slid across gleaming floors. There were intercom announcements were hasty. Travelers' footprints and the family's occasional laughs setting out on fresh adventures in the crowd as well as the sea of travelers. Zara Bennett was notable not due to her desired attention but because to the Zara stood with the peaceful assurance she held, clutching her first class in silence pass for boarding. She was a calm, courteous teenager. Her enthusiasm was restrained by her inherent Zara had a big day today because of her shyness. This flight was more than just a trip. It was a moment of happiness for her new accomplishments since she recently completed her study following the receipt of a distinguished financial aid to study in the Imagine, wearing a nice outfit that Zara's effortless style was evident as she walked through the first class lounge, which is exclusive. Her boy in the lounge, hand in hand with its ambient plush leather chairs, gentle jazz music playing and lighting in the backdrop, was a haven of privilege and comfort surrounding her. Free lattes were consumed by travelers, crimson newspapers, and continued to tap. Zara took a seat at one of the laptops. She sits in comfortable couches with her phone and the coffee on the table before her, checked her boarding pass for the show. For the eighth time, not out of uncertainty, but out of the first class seat wasn't as anticipated, a luxury that she showed off, but it was one that had every reason to be happy, just like Zara scanned through a message on her phone. Appeared just before boarding from her father. Tell me when you're comfortable, Zara answered. I'll text you when I'm almost there. Everything is good on the plane. Zara's Victor Bennett father was more than just he was the proud owner of the Extremely. She was going to board the airline, but his modest demeanor meant he rarely showed off. His status, Zara had watched him grow up, take care of everyone, even the cleaning workers. Executives on the board with the same degree of she had always admired his respect. Modesty in spite of his enormous success. He had taught her the virtues of few people are kind and respectful, recognized Zara as Victor's daughter, would rather not discuss family matters. And Zara enjoyed the way she looked at it, her thoughts while out on the tarmac. She had not been floating for a moment, home after more than 2 years of residing in different state for her education, while she cherished the absence of independence. From her relatives, particularly it hadn't been easy, Father Victor Bennett. This journey seemed unique. It was more than merely a flight. It was a journey back to the life she had led absent. When she got on the plane, she was looking forward to the reunion that awaited them. The nice meal with her father arranged to greet her upon her return, and the opportunity to consider how far they had arrived as a family. But Zara was unable to have anticipated the difficulties she would face on that aircraft, and neither was able to. Claudia, the flight attendant, is knowledgeable about her prejudice was going to cause her a lot of grief. Because of her, on this stumble across the living room on her way back, in relation to her PH, she saw two flight attendants positioned close to one of the women at the service desk, had angular features and a bun that is tightly wrapped, looked toward Claudia in Zara's direction. Harper, the chief flight attendant, shared a smile with her coworker. The first class is becoming too easily accessible. Claudia whispered to herself. That tone exuded dominance, as though some passengers weren't worthy of share the area with her coworker. Giggled uneasily but remained silent. The announcement about boarding reverberated through. Zara stood at the terminal, adjusting her carry-on, and headed toward the gate. Claudia is currently joining the first-class queue. Positioned at the aircraft's entry, scanned the boarding passes of every traveler. Greetings from aboard, with a well-practiced smile. She spoke kindly to a white older man in a fitted suit, to a different woman who was holding, Claudia chirped, and enjoyed a fashionable purse. When Zara arrived at the front of your flight, after the line, Claudia's attitude changed. Very faintly, she glanced at Zara's pass. She narrowed her gaze at the ticket for a moment, obviously read the first class, but rather than Zara being led to her proper place... Oh, Claudia forced a tight smile. Claudia, economy is right down the aisle, remarked, gesturing to the rear of the Zara. The plane blinked in astonishment this time. First class, she said. Displaying it so Claudia can view it, didn't hesitate. There had to be an error, plus adjust her tone to economy. Was courteous at first glance, yet carried in Zara's unquestionable edge of dismissal. Her voice, but her carry-on tightened. Stay composed. This isn't a mistake. I was seated behind first-class guests. Zara started to move impatiently in the Claudia is becoming more tense at the gate. She leaned nearer, her voice trailing off. I don't want you to look at me too closely because simply go to the economy so that we can hold on to things. Have you ever received treatment for moving unfairly simply because they believed you didn't? What would you do if you were a Zara employee? Circumstance. Please share your opinions in the remember to click and leave a comment below. Click the subscribe button right now if you're a fan. This tale, Zara stood up and refused to back down. Into the aircraft, her posture steadfast, Claudia's gaze trailed after her. With a flash of Zara crossed her face in displeasure as she walked to her designated first-class seat and put her luggage in the overhead bin. The cabin was huge and immaculate, seats in a serene setting. Zara seated herself and adjusted the window shade. A few seconds later, Claudia walked into the cabin. Seasoned expert, renowned for her non-nonsense manner and keen perception of her heels, clicked sharply in detail. Against the ground, she went to Zara's row with a mask on her face, that expert. She looked at Zara with courtesy, unreadable expression, and held up a hand. Excuse me, young lady Claudia, to stop her. First, she spoke in a stern yet courteous tone. Class is only available to those who can afford it. Zara, a passenger, blinked briefly. She gazed down at her boarding in shock. I am a first-class student at AIA. Passenger, she answered in a steady voice. However, she stretched her hand and gave me my ticket. The pass to Claudia in anticipation of the issue to be promptly resolved, but Claudia refused to accept the ticket. Instead, she crossed her arms and looked at Zara doubtfully. Look, Claudia remarked, I don't think so. Dismissively move away as I deal with Zara felt as though she had been slapped by these remarks. For a minute, I remained still, uncertain of how around her the murmurs were answered by resp. Started the queue of passengers in the economy were becoming aware of the exchange. Some looked at one another pityingly, while others, Zara sensed judgments being uttered. Every look they gave her served as a reminder of the disgrace she was experiencing. Claudia continued after that, taking a move ahead, her voice becoming louder. Sharper, please show me your ticket once more. Are you certain you didn't inadvertently take the pass from someone else's? S held out the ticket again, her hand shaking. She whispered, It's mine, a little. Zara asked softly, Is my ticket? But adamantly, my father. It's not a mistake. Bought it for me. Claudia brought up, and her tone was laden with uncertainty about your where is his father now? He is waiting, Zara responded for me at our arrival. Claudia scoffed a little and looked about as though to get approval for her unbelief. Claudia paused, her gaze darting to the ticket, after which I'll return to Zara. Going to have to confirm this, she stated. Zara sat still here and waited curtly. A knot of embarrassment tightens inside her, whispered around her passenger's chest. Some gave her sympathetic looks, while others displayed judging facial expressions. Someone volunteered to assist or inquire. Zara felt the sting of what was happening, of seclusion, but what her father said reverberated in her consciousness, constantly maintaining your dignity even while others. It was difficult not to allow her tears stabbed at her as emotions overcame her. Edges of her eyes, but she declined. She inhaled deeply to release them. Zara reminded herself of her identity, Bennett, a man's daughter who constructed a man who built an empire from the ground up. Told her that being respectful was not one could borrow from her as Claudia left in Zara's direction, stood by herself, her face flaming with passengers' shame as they continued to look in her direction as their muttering intensified. Claudia came back a few minutes later, louder. Later, pardon me, she started talking. More loudly than I should, I must beg you to proceed to this seat's economy. Section has been allocated to another individual that falls within this category of portion. A few of travelers turned there. Zara quietly looks at the chaos, grasped her boarding pass once more, keeping it up silently. But this is... How can my seat be assigned to Zara? Questioned Claudia strongly, but someone else. Her polite masks were crossed over her arms. Slipping, if you don't follow instructions, I'll have... In order to escalate this and contact security? There was a lot of anxiety in the cabin as Zara silently met Claudia's gaze. Resolved that the standoff had only recently, whispers started to spread like wildfire. Among the travelers, a businessman leaned in his direction. The murmuring of a friend appears to be someone's trying their luck on the other side of the aisle, and an elderly woman scowled at her face. She doesn't appear to approve of this, whispered to herself, but not. There was a man sitting with everyone on Zara's side. Mumbled, well, a few rows back. The attendant doesn't belong here. You have every right to doubt her, Claudia. Resolved to exercise her authority and unwilling to compromise, took the final step. She requested the security minutes. Later, 2 officers got on the aircraft. Their presence provides an additional layer of tension in the events that are taking place drama. They went up to Zara's chair, and Zara's professional yet firm expressions, who carefully described none of the circumstances, displayed her voice and boarding pass. She remained steady while defending her right to sit where she should have been. But the story won out. Her authority is respected by the cops. One of the officers remarked, "Ma'am," his voice, "we have been questioned in a low yet authoritative manner. Zara met you to lead you to another seat." Their eyes and her soothing voice as she described the circumstances. "This is she said, holding up her designated seat. "I'll show them my boarding pass. The cops have every right to be present." Paused, looking at Claudia, for she nodded sharply in support of her experience. "Her seat is an economy one, according to vindication." In spite of Zara's objection, she said strongly, and the cop's valid ticket obeyed Claudia's orders. They accompanied Zara to the whispers, an economy, and the passengers' looks as they follow her. Her poise never wavered down the aisle. Stumbled, but the embarrassment was, "Claudia, you're back in first class." Returned with a triumphant air, she strolled through the cabin, feeling dejected. Her voice bearing only a contented smile, sufficient to guarantee that she was heard. How do you deal with troublemakers?" she asked. Then a fellow flight attendant looked. She added, looking around at the passengers, "First class, smugly, is for those who belong here." Zara, humbled but calm, moved over to her new passenger crane seat. Next, to observe their responses mixed, some uninterested, others. Some people are smugly satisfied and empathetic. Claudia strode through the first class. Her voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. To hear a cocky grin appear on her face expression when she looked at the girl. Doesn't even appear to be someone who belongs in she's attempting to claim first class. Only those who belong here are allowed to use this cabin. Here, her voice was brimming with self-contentment. Was Claudia correct in her assessment of Zara? Due to the color of her skin, inform us in the remarks, and whether you think fairness for every subscriber that hits button for further tales similar to this one. As the flight carried on, the soft murmur of the cabin appeared to be in stark contrast to Zara, the tension that permeates the air. Her posture when seated in her economy seat, standing erect and her face composed, she seemed at ease on the outside, but on the inside, she looked at her with a frustrated nod. The unsent text message to her was on her phone. This isn't the father, still on the screen. Yes, Dad, I know why they didn't trust me, but she was hesitant to mail it since she knew he would take immediate action, probably without subtlety. Zara maintained her composure, although it wasn't simple. Felt the burden of Claudia's judgment with each doubtful look. Every disparaging comment wasn't merely the humiliation of having it questioned, was the subliminal message she didn't belong because she wasn't sufficient, yet Zara had no intention of allowing those emotions to absorb her. She inhaled deeply, even as the other passengers' whispers increased in volume. Despite the stares becoming, Zara held her head high, making her tougher to ignore. She experienced the burn of embarrassment within. However, she refused to let it. While in the meantime, a fellow in first class, a flight attendant, asked Claudia about why she did those things to the small. Claudia responded to the girl in a condescending manner. She believed she could simply enter and make a claim. Claudia shouted aloud everything she wanted, enough for passengers in the vicinity to hear. However, experience is necessary to see through such sort of bullshit, and I had to place her where she belongs. Belongs to a few travelers who gave courteous. Others laughed, and they looked at each other uneasily. Feeling that what she was saying was anything but a professional sitting in Zara's economy, maintained her poise in spite of the humiliation she had just gone through. The first class ticket is proof of her. It felt like a harsh place now. Joke aside, she took out her phone. She typed, her fingers quivering a little. A note to her dad, they move me. According to the flight attendant, economy, my chair was an error. Victor Bennett's response arrived. His messages were brief, almost immediately. Brief, but packed with reassurance. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. Tell me if anything else occurs, Zara. Looked at the screen for a while before father's steadfast assistance providing her vigor. She inhaled deeply and slipped, putting her phone back in her bag for the time being. Would hold off in the hopes that her father's, the time for intervention, would be right. Zara got up a little later, too. She stretches her legs as she moves toward the restroom in the aircraft's rear. As she waited, a quiet voice came from behind her. I witnessed what transpired. Zara had already turned to see an older first-class woman with gentle eyes were full with worry, and her voice contained a blend of stillness and empathy. Outrage that the woman wasn't entitled to, proceeded, you didn't deserve to be treated gently like that if I can do anything. Please give me a moment to assist. Zara wasn't prepared for the woman's. She managed to smile a little out of charity. Thank you, she answered. Thank you, but I'll be... All right. The woman nodded and placed a soft... You're handling this, Zara. Put your hand on her arm. Grace is more than most people. She offered Zara an assurance that people would manage. Uplifting grin before going back to Claudia took her seat back in first class. Harper continued to revel in her. She leaned against the seeming victory. Galley talked with a carrying voice. To her co-workers exchanged doubtful looks and the uneasiness with their facial gestures becoming more. Those who heard her boasting listened. Some of them shivered and muttered to one another, silently disapproving their heads, yet no one person addressed Claudia directly, but didn't know about her confidence expanded as she went on. To be honest, it's about doing them a favor, upholding norms. If we let everyone too in its turmoil while sat in the little space of Zara, did her best to stay in the economy. Calmed, her hands lightly resting on her lap. Her, breathing steadily but internally. Anger boiled up just below the surface. She gazed from the tiny window overlooking the limitless cloudscape, intending to divert her attention from the persistent feeling of injustice that had followed her every minute she got on the aircraft. After a short while, she made the decision to something basic, something that would change her focus even for a brief moment. Zara hit the tiny call button up top. The faint chime barely heard from her seat above the hum of the plane. She waited with a slight lean, waiting for someone to come over with patience. After a few minutes, Zara observed others as flight attendants ascend and descend the aisle, providing silent assistance to travelers' efficiency, but none approached her. At last she caught sight of Claudia Harper. Heading in the direction of her section, Claudia's face was impossible to read. The shiny exterior is still in place. However, there was a clear advantage to her motions. She was suddenly interrupted by Zara's Rose's voice was cold and abrasive. Zara glanced up at her as she said, "Yes," addressing her eyes with tactful silence. "Would you please give me a drink of water?" Questioned her in a calm, controlled tone. Claudia responded right away, although she gave Kurt a slender smile that didn't make sure she said her eyes. Before turning on her heel, her voice was clipped. And leaving without saying anything more, Zara watched as she backed away. Quiet but inquisitive expression, she looked for a few minutes at her watch. Gone. And 10 minutes later, no water had arrived. Zara's gaze trailed after Claudia as she passed through the cabin in first class. She observed as the flight attendant offered others beverages, with care travelers giving them practice grinning and interacting with light. Claudia's movements during the talk appeared nearly overdone, as though she intended to demonstrate her effectiveness and attentiveness, yet throughout the entire time she stayed away from Zara's area completely. The intentionality of it, Zara didn't miss it, so she answered the phone. Button once more, her patience starting to. This time the delicate chiming felt thin, louder and nearly derisive in her ears. Sound that highlighted her developing. Claudia was so frustrated that she eventually went back to. Her motions are slower in the economic segment. Almost hesitantly, she went to Zara's. Her face was now stained with something like irritation. "Yeah," she questioned once more in a tone that was harsh enough to cause a few passengers in the vicinity to look up. Zara spoke calmly, despite it. "Needed work, so I asked for water." She had earlier asked if I may have it now. Claudia remained silent for a bit before a tight-lipped smile sent back a purposeful and phony gesture. "I'll take care of it," she spoke in a voice brimming with disregard. Without offering Zara an opportunity to reply, she vanished again. Inside the serene exterior of first class, Zara started to break. The willful animosity of the circumstances was now obvious. The sting of embarrassment subsided. She looked further in her chest. Did anybody else see what was occurred? Were they disregarding it? Or was her eyes fell as she realized how alone she was? The screen of her phone was still flashing. Staying with her father's previous statement, "I'll handle it calmly. Let me know if anything else." She tapped the screen and started typing, while her fingers moved silently. The flight attendant's urgency, "Dad, is focusing on me," and willfully ignoring, making me feel uncomfortable and refusing my wishes. Its becoming into Zara found the words intolerable and gazed at them for a few seconds before to sending the finality of her behavior, which brought both her father's relief and frustration. Response arrived nearly instantly as it, "I'm making sure you stay where you are." The reaction to the call was brief, although Zara knew her father, so she carried weight. Wasn't inclined to overlook things if he claimed to be making a call, meaning enterprise. She inhaled deeply as attempting to regain her balance as she waited for the situation's weight, weighed down on her as if she were invisible force. She couldn't resist looking, pondering whether any of the other passengers had observed her behavior. As she received treatment, a few sympathetic looks, but no additional. Their inaction and silence seemed almost as just as alienating as Claudia's. Her actions caused her thoughts to be disturbed. With a soft motion close to a young girl, who occupied the second economy seat, near Zara, her face was warm. But brimming with a silent resolve, she spoke softly as she leaned in a little. However, asserting that a flight attendant is always, when she sees a black person, she is enraged, believes we don't fit in, and are unable to tickets for first class. That sort of, I hope that such behavior won't be accepted. She quickly receives karma for what she has done. She spoke to you in an airy tone. Of silent indignation, Zara looked at her, poise slipping a little in the face. Despite the girl's genuine gratitude that she will undoubtedly receive her karma, she spoke steadily and quietly today. But emotionally charged, Zara provided a tiny smile of gratitude. "I'm grateful for that." Her voice was sincere. As she said, "But I'll be all right. I appreciate you speaking up. It means many." The girl nodded as she departed. A glimmer of warmth from Zara in the tension as Zara left and came back her attention to the current circumstance. Dad had stated that he would make the call. Now her only option was to wait halfway. During the journey, while the aircraft cruised, the quiet hum of the clouds overhead, the sound of something interrupted the cockpit, the safe line. Making a seasoned call to the captain, professional with many years of expertise. He scooped up the receiver beneath his belt. At first his expression was neutral, eyes examining the devices outside of habit, but as the other person's voice. His expression changed as he talked, somewhat scowled, and his stance corrected. The voice was that of Victor Bennett, proprietor of the airline, in spite of the cool, collected tone. There was no misunderstanding. Credibility of his statements, Victor and instructions were purposeful and unambiguous, leaving no space for interpretation. "Yes, sir, the captain." His voice was firm yet carrying as he replied. A fresh sense of urgency recognized. The talk was short and ended quickly, little than a minute, but its effects persisted. Long after the captain's call ended, returned the receiver to its cradle, he let out a deep exhale, knowing that when someone called, like Victor Bennett, it wasn't a casual question in mid-flight, was a prompt response following him. The captain thought for a while and activated the head flight, was called by the intercom. Claudia Harper, an attendant, is still in the first-class cabin, was situated in the center of a boisterous exchange with her co-worker. She felt the tap on her at that moment. Startled, she looked over her shoulder and discovered behind her. The captain's face was calm, yet his countenance was grave. Attracted her interest right away. Claudia's first irritation at being abruptly given way to trepidation, Captain Miss Harper stated in a firm yet restrained tone, In order to talk to you." Claudia straightened her posture in an attempt to keep her typical air of assurance. She naturally stated, her voice clear. "What's wrong with the captain?" Didn't spend any time. "I've simply was contacted by Mr. Victor Bennett." He started to pause in order to process the name. Claudia furrowed her brow in certainty. Victor hesitated for the first time. "Bennett," she hardly changed her voice. Above a whisper, the skipper acknowledged his tone. "Steady, the airline's owner. He has been made aware of an incident. His daughter was on the aircraft at..." When Zara Claudia's face is mentioned paled, The fragments started to drop into location, and then she realized that a chilly old man cautiously waves at her created story about managing. Suddenly, troublemakers felt weak and insufficient. The captain carried on with his voice with a sense of closure. Mr. Bennett has told me to allow you to realize that he'll be meeting the aircraft. When he personally lands, he anticipates a justification, and he wants you to, to properly care for and treat her as best you can for a little moment. Claudia remained still. Her thoughts were racing as the color faded from her expression, as the situation's weight officially registered, although I was unaware that her typical sharpness was replaced by a stutter. With hesitation, the captain's face remarked, "Didn't change, that's irrelevant. The way this circumstance was is what counts." Claudia's customary bluster was broken. She gave a tight nod under the strain. She managed to utter, her throat dry, "Recognized?" As the captain stepped back and turned to Claudia, remained anchored in the cockpit. Display her self-assurance with pride. Shown throughout the journey was now. She murmured a faraway recollection beneath her breath as though attempting to reassure. "I'm positive that is just her." Words were unconvinced, and the uneasy nod. Seeing her becoming more powerful with every elapsed minute for the remaining, Claudia's attitude during the flight was apparent. Slowed her pace after being brisk and deliberate, were more sluggish and uncertain. The arrogant comments that had flown so freely previously were now gone and replaced by a tense quiet among travelers who had saw her previous behavior but was unable to ignore the shift in whispers. Their tones reverberated around the cabin. From curiosity to silence, Claudia was satisfied, but she avoided facing anyone's eyes. Her thoughts were absorbed in a single notion, the conflict that was waiting for her. What do you anticipate happening when landing? When the plane lands, Claudia, will she accept the repercussions of her behavior? Leave a comment with your ideas. Below, then select subscribe. If you were captivated by Claudia's narrative, Harper, in the instance following the words were quite terrifying. Zara Bennett was revealed to be the daughter of Airline CEO Victor Bennett. Owner had undermined her self-esteem each time. The cabin felt heavier with each step she made. Her once vivacious and confident attitude changed to one that was anxious, hesitating to say the things he will encounter. The aircraft, as it landed, reverberated persistently like a warning. In her consciousness, Belle was unable to. Claudia tried to continue in silence. Her responsibilities, she grabbed a tray to present. Her hands were shaking from the refreshments. Getting close to a passenger, she made herself grin in first class, but her voice. "Would you like a drink?" she faltered, asked, hardly looking at them. The passenger scowled, perplexed by her unexpected. Although the tone changed, the drink was accepted. Without commenting, her co-workers, who had now accustomed to her boldness, looked at each other curiously. Claudia's, the typical sharpness, vanished, to be replaced by her hands fumbled in apparent discomfort as she gathered empty glasses and stayed away from establishing eye contact with the travelers. There were whispers among the crew members and seated. "What's wrong with her?" One, close by. Another co-worker inquired about her appearance. "She has observed a ghost," but Claudia wasn't distracted by simple internal conflict that started to seep. She misinterpreted the traveler into her work. Items were served to the Rome Rose upon request, and neglected the commands she had just received. Passengers observed her frequent visits. She stayed longer in the galley, more than was required, her hands clutching the counters as though attempting to regain her balance. The assurance she once displayed had disappeared completely. Claudia eventually arrived she looked at the breaking point. Zara maintained her poise in the downturn. Remaining intact in spite of all that had Zara, was browsing through her when it happened, phone with a small, sly smile on her face. Claudia's gut constricted as she couldn't stand to think about Victor Bennett getting on the aircraft and speaking to her directly without trying to put things right. Claudia swallowed her pride and reached for a tray and walked up to Zara's chair. As she got closer to each, her heart raced. Step that feels like a trial halting. She cleared her throat next to Zara's roll. Miss Bennet started off awkwardly, uncharacteristically soft voice. Could I get you a food or a drink? Zara might have looked her up with a hot towel. Her eyes are keen, but her demeanor is neutral. Thank you, she remarked in a courteous tone. Claudia, composed but aloof, paused. Her features slipped into a false smile. Just a little bit. Are you certain of anything? Tell me that Zara shook her, please. Had the rejection hurt, but I'm okay. Claudia wasn't prepared to abandon the following hour. She repeatedly went to offering everything she had, Zara's row. Consider more blankets and high-quality snacks. Even a better dinner every time Zara refused her answers without fail. Courteous, yet tough with the other travelers, observed the exchanges that took place with increasing interest. Whispers filled the cabin as people openly questioned what had caused Claudia's unexpected shift in, "She never acts with this level of attention." The traveler whispered to their friend, "It must have happened because I've never seen her in this manner," said another, trembling. "She's virtually falling on their head." Zara, however, wasn't over herself. Shocked that she was aware of the change in Claudia, didn't have a sincere approach. Regret, yet every time Zara came up to her and gave her the subtle reminder, with the same calm smile. The flight attendant who makes an effort to attempt to repair the harm. Were futile, Claudia finally left the tray, gathered together and went to Zara. She had nothing, and her face was tense. Her customary demeanor of power with the urgent need to find a solution, she lowered herself slightly in a crouching position. Miss Bennet, at Zara's eye level, her voice started to tremble a little. "I wanted to apologize for what I did earlier. It was a miscommunication on my end." Didn't know, she wandered off, uncertain of how to complete the phrase without further implicating herself. "I hope, Zara, we can simply move on from this." Examined her calmness for a time. Attitude unfazed, then with measured. She said, "The matter is no." Claudia blinked as she held my hands longer. Perplexed, "What do you mean by my dad?" Zara carried on with her tone. "Handling it now. He is the one who will remain firm but stable. Choose if you're for sure or not." Earlier, Claudia's face fell, her calmness eroding even more. She opened her mouth to reply, but nothing came out. The weight of Zara's assertion hung out. In the atmosphere, making no space for Claudia, is negotiating for the first time. Recognized the seriousness of what she was doing and that the results were completely from her control, Zara returned her focus, signaling to her phone that the discussion was over. Claudia remained there for a little while longer, her mind whirling. She retreated to the galley, the additional travelers who had been seeing the conversation with rapt whispering to each other for attention. Their interest and conjecture are increasing. But for Zara, the circumstances were obvious. She had suffered embarrassment and animosity, but the power dynamics had changed as she took a quick look out the window. A slight grin appeared on her lips. This was... "Think it's only the beginning, Claudia?" "Should be pardoned. Please inform us in the remarks. And remember to click the subscribe button as soon as the plane lands." Travelers traveling nicely on the runway collected their possessions in anticipation of disembark, but tons of people had observed the strange activity outdoors. Via the windows, a sleek black SUV pulled up. Up next to the plane, its lustrous surface shining beneath the airport illumination, Victor emerged as the door opened. Bennett, the airline's owner, his very presence was intimidating, but he was two senior executives are on either side, making this was obviously not your typical visit. The whispers, began within the aircraft. Almost instantly, who is that person? The traveler nudged their seatmate. He looks, Victor Bennett is another significant figure. His eyes widened in a whisper. I own the airlock. Why is Victor here? Victor climbed the stairs leading to the plane with a deliberate step, his face composed and solemn. When he stepped into the cabin, the mood switched talks to silent and all that. He looked at the rose as the eyes shifted to him. His eyes suddenly fell on Zara, who was his expression, while seated in economy, softened when he approached her directly. His face's tense lines are relaxing. When he briefly arrived at her, he lowered herself just enough to meet her eye level. His soft, loving voice broke the silence. Are you okay? He asked. With obvious apprehension, Zara glanced up at him. Her calm demeanor revealed I'm fine, she said with a glimmer of relief, even while there were hints of persistent annoyance. It's just been a lot. Victor put his comforting hand on. It's over now, he muttered to her shoulder. Gently, this won't be a problem for you. Continuing to straighten Victor's. The warmth in his expression changed. Disappeared from the place set aside for his daughter, supplanted with a composed yet stern authority figure, he focused on Claudia Harper, who was motionless in front of her face was as pale as usual in the cabin. Crispness is totally lacking in the understanding that Victor Bennett had arrived was written all over her. For her features, Miss Harper, Victor started his I comprehend your steady, measured voice. Something went wrong with my daughters. Claudia's poise broke down in the seat. She opened her mouth as though to speak, but there was a brief silence. At last she stumbled, I'm not sure. It was true that she was your daughter. Sir, a miscommunication. Victor's eyes stayed. His tone didn't waver as he remained focused on her. Rise, but the significance of what he said was, clearly the question is whether you... He said, I knew she was my daughter. Calm voice, but addressing the problem is how way you handled her, and probably how you handle people who don't fit your preconceived notions. Claudia's expression darkened and she attempted to reply, but her words just came out. I didn't mean to speak incoherently. Recognize Victor's tiny hand raise, suppressing her attempts to explanation for your actions today has been completely inappropriate. He kept talking to not just Claudia. However, this airline's whole cabin was founded on the values of deference and honor, from which our prosperity has resulted, handling each traveler regardless of who they are or their origins. With impartiality and expertise, your today's activities have failed. Those appreciates the cabin's silence just now. Passengers applauded as they burst into cheers. With great enthusiasm, their endorsement of Victor's voice reverberated across the room. While some gave a nod of agreement, others looked at each other, satisfied that Claudia's behavior was being dealt with. But Claudia appeared embarrassed by her. Her hands shook and her head sank low as she gripped the service's edge. Ballet cart, the cheers seemed to an indictment. With every applause enhancing her, she opened her mouth in embarrassment to... I apologized once more, but Victor refused to hear the chance effective immediately, he replied. Addressing the executives of the airline, Miss Harper is supposed to be at his side. Dismissed from duty due to her actions today does not meet the requirements of she and this airline will be detained. One of the executives nodded in accountability. He pointed to Miss Harper. Claudia. Come with us, please, he replied forcefully. Claudia surveyed her features with a mixture of disgrace, and she cast a quick glance at Zara in desperation, who looked into her eyes with a cool, collected. Zara's look was devoid of malice. Eyes, but there was no pardon either, just a silent assurance that justice was being served. While Claudia was led away, the passengers on the plane murmured to each other, themselves making some remarks about the fairness of the she had it coming she mumbled. People can't be treated that way and still get away with Zara. Returned to her seat and observed the scene reveal her feelings, a mixture of calm and relief. Her father gave her back her vindication. Alongside him, a stabilizing influence is, "Are you sure you're okay?" he repeated. Zara nodded in a soft voice. "I'm all right now." She spoke in a louder voice than previously. "I'm grateful." Dad Victor gave her a little, "You never need to thank me for making you smile." "Defending you," he replied. "That's what I'm present." For Zara, as the aircraft started to empty, joined her father in standing. The day's events enhanced their friendship. Passengers continued to witness occurrences around them. Several people are making fun of Zara's appearance. Respect and affection during the weeks after the incident, the airline didn't waste any time in addressing the circumstances Victor Bennett is in, devoted to maintaining the principles on which his business was founded, requested a review of staff training, immediately programs that he himself collaborated with his leadership group to execute the required seminars on inclusion and diversity. And the purpose of these seminars was to guarantee that no traveler, regardless of their history, would ever have to deal with the Zara received the kind of treatment. That training wasn't merely surface level, it was through putting workers under pressure to face their prejudices and consider how their behavior could have an impact on others. Activities, including role-playing and visiting speakers, were introduced to discuss the real world. Tales of prejudice and the long-term damage it causes to workers was reminded that their role wasn't just to serve passengers but to uphold the dignity and respect of everyone who boarded their planes. Meanwhile, Claudia Harper had been dismissed from her position. After the incident for weeks, she stayed away from the airline, reflecting on her actions. Initially, she felt a mix of embarrassment and anger. But as time passed, those feelings were replaced with regret and shame. She realized that her behavior wasn't just unprofessional, it was deeply unfair and rooted in assumptions she hadn't questioned before. One evening, as Claudia sat at her kitchen table, she opened her laptop and began to type her email to the airline was long and heartfelt. Each word carefully chosen to convey her remorse. She apologized not just for what she had done to Zara, but for the mindset that had allowed such behavior to seem acceptable. Claudia acknowledged that she had failed. As a representative of the airline's values and as a human being, "I can't undo the harm I caused," she wrote, "but I am committed to learning from this and ensuring it never happens again. If given the chance, I would like to prove that I have changed." When Victor Bennett read the email, he saw sincerity in Claudia's work words. After discussing it with his team, they decided to give her a second chance under strict probationary terms. Claudia was invited to return to work, but with a clear understanding her actions would be monitored and any further incidents of unprofessionalism or prejudice would result in immediate dismissal. Claudia returned to the airline, humbled and determined to make amends. She threw herself into the training, CSS, often volunteering to speak about her own experience and how it had changed her perspective. Over time, her colleagues noticed a transformation. She was no longer the flight attendant who dismissed others based on assumptions. Instead, she became someone who went out of her way to ensure that every passenger felt valued. Victor Bennett, meanwhile, took the opportunity to speak publicly about the incident at a press conference held weeks after the flight. He addressed the media with a calm but resolute demeanor. "Inclusion is not optional, it's a responsibility." He began, his voice steady. "Privilege comes with responsibility, whether it's the privilege of serving as a flight attendant or the privilege of sitting in first class. We all have a duty to treat each other with respect and dignity. No one should ever feel unwelcome or unworthy because of their appearance or background." His words struck a chord, and the story quickly went viral. Social media platforms buzzed with conversations about prejudice and accountability. Hashtags like "inclusion matters" and "respect for all" trended for days. Many praised Victor's leadership and transparency, while others shared their own experiences with discrimination. using the story as a springboard for broader discussions. Barara. The experience became a turning point in her life. Reflecting on everything that had happened, she realized how much she had learned about strength, resilience, and the power of standing up for oneself. Her father's unwavering support had shown her that dignity and respect were non negotiable values, and she carried those lessons with her. Zara also saw the ripple effect of the incident. The airline's new training programs, the viral conversations online, and even Claudia's transformation were all proof that change was possible. Though the experience had been painful, it had also been empowering. This brings us back to the skies. Weeks later, Zara and Victor found themselves on another flight, seated side by side. In first class, Zara glanced around, observing the crew as they worked. Their movements were professional, their smiles genuine, and their interactions respectful. There was no hesitation or judgment, only the seamless service her father's airline was known for, as one of the flight attendants offered her a drink with a warm smile. Zara returned the gesture. She looked over at her father and smiled knowingly. This flight was a far cry from the last one. And the change was palpable. It wasn't just about the crew, it was about the empowerment she felt in herself. Zara knew she had emerged from the experience stronger and more self assured than ever. She leaned back in her seat, a quiet sense of satisfaction washing over. Her change wasn't always easy, but it was always worth fighting for. If you believe in standing up for fairness, equality, and respect for everyone, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this. See you in the next one.